So I'm sure people would love to hear us talk about our fun stuff, but let's talk about the more important stuff. And if
application rationalization is fun too, Terrence.
It is. You're correct, right, Chris? I need to give it its proper due. And for anyone that's here, if the title of your application portfolio is bleeding you dry, and that we have the 100-day cure hasn't got you there, I mean that's like about as good of a marketing hook as it's going to get. But I will tell you guys, experts are that word is thrown around a lot, but Chris Pio and Ron Sims are both experts in this area. So if you're interested today, obviously you're here. I think you're going to learn a lot. And I think, and welcome, guys.
Thanks. Morning.
So let's get this started. For the dumb guy in the room, you guys know who that is, right?
Well, don't automatically assume it's you.
It's me. It's always me, Ron.
Thing, you know what I'm saying?
It's an easy one. It's an easy one. It's always me. Let's talk about, so give me kind of a definition of application rationalization, because it's a big word. I have to think about it a lot of times, right? Let's give like a high level view definition of it, and maybe you can kind of take it down.
Let's take it, because it's 2 words, lots of letters, and it can mean a lot of things. So let's start from, we even define it when we sell to different people, when we work with different people as different things. Application rationalization could be as simple as a system selection, which means you've got the discovery, the inventory, the implementation, the optimizations. It could be a migration, a rehosting. We can do workflow assessments, upgrades. All these things really can be defined under application rationalization. So anything that you're going to do to either improve or optimize or simplify your portfolio. What we're going to talk about in this session is the broader application rationalization, which is really the governance, the ongoing long-term living, breathing program that ensures that customers and systems and providers and payers are optimized with their application portfolio, are using it to their best bet. And we'll see how this ties into all your other strategies as well. Aren't using redundant tools, aren't using end-of-life tools, aren't overpaying for infrastructure costs, DR costs, and those types of things because they're bloated in their applications. We always say it, everyone likes the bright, shiny penny. A new application's fun to install. Everyone's looking forward to it, what it's going to do. And pretty much most places only use 10, 20, 30, 40% of it, and they don't even go into the other pieces at times. What many organizations are, and we'll go much deeper into this, is they're bad at unplugging. They're bad at turning it off. They're bad at saying, we don't use this anymore. I'm willing to let it go, make it go away. And that's all part of the strategy. And the thing about application rationalization that we're going to talk about today is it's not a one and done. It's not a simple implementation. It's not for the weak of heart, because it's really ups and downs and peaks and valleys and long-term roadmaps and fighting for budget and fighting for resources. So we'll go into the details how within 100 days, you could put a nice strategy around it, and that's the goal. You can understand where you're going to go from there. And then you have to really make this a governance, just like you would make risk management governance, just like you would make data governance. So that's the level of what we're going to talk about today in application.
Yeah, just to put it in like the healthcare terms, right? I mean, it's kind of like you're creating this game plan for getting better, right? Or for prescription, but it doesn't mean at the end of that 100 days that you're done, cured, and you can go on with life, right? You're going to put some things in place that are going to help you as guidelines, over a period of time, right? That it's not just a snapshot in time, it's an ongoing.
Business requirements change, business strategies change, technology changes, vendors change, they go in and out of business, products get retired. It should never end. And that's the challenge. That's ultimately the challenge we're going to work through here is it never comes off as important as some of the other strategies of an organization. Obviously, again, risk management has to be, with everything going on these days, has to be, top shelf. Data management with everything going on, AI, those types of things, those are very, top shelf type things. But your application rationalization needs to be there. And that's what you need, a program and a team that will ensure that they're fighting the good fight. Because it's going to be the thing that gets pushed to the bottom when the budgets are low. It's going to be the thing that gets pushed to the bottom when resources are tied up. But you need to continue it. Otherwise, you're going to just continue to waste money, waste energy, waste resources, IT sustainability, all those things.
Do you think most firms are most healthcare systems are aware of this problem? I mean, in both from a high level and from, I mean, I'm sure in pieces they are, but
they definitely are. I mean, we were down with one of our customers this week doing an IT summit, and we had some great conversations. They're aware. They understand how important this is. The problem is getting the traction. The problem is getting the funding. The problem is getting the resources and focus. I mean, everyone's busy. We live in the busiest time of both, in both the provider and the payer side. There's just ongoing optimizations, cost savings, optimizations of business resources, strategies. All these things always come to the top. New functions, new revenue. But I'm sure if you talk to enterprise architects in any organization, they have this in the back of their mind. I'm sorry, Ryan, I'm just finished. And what ends up happening
there real quick is that you mentioned two words there, and this is why they're aware of it, right? Application rationalization should never end. It's ongoing, right? The reality is, as businesses are growing, businesses are doing things, they're adding more, they're doing more. It's always ongoing and it's always growing. So therefore, no one ever does it, right? They keep cobbling things together, they keep adding things together. And next thing you know, I got 10 solutions to doing what 3 solutions should do. So I think that's where we're kind of drive to. But Chris's point is very, very relevant. It's always ongoing, but that's the governance piece. That's the final piece of the overall.
But to answer your question, I think most organizations are aware. They just can't get the momentum.
Right.
So what's the best way to get momentum? I mean, you got to start from somewhere, right? I mean, and I would guess that it has to do with, right, like, starting.
Let's start with what it is. How do you drive it internally?
Yes.
Here's the problem statement. Ron and I come from the payer side where we've done enterprise imaging for decades. And especially in this world where people are buying hospitals and buying health systems and they each have their own PACS system or whatever, then what ends up happening is you have 5 PACS systems within a health system. You have images all over the place. You're shipping images left, right, and center, even electronically. And you need to come up with a strategy to merge them at some time. Well, that's a true application rationalization. What's your long-term enterprise imaging strategy? What do you need to do? Same thing on the payer side with just document imaging in any case. So you can go into organization and you really need to do a top-down approach of inventory. And Ron's going to go through the specific steps in a few minutes. But you need to understand, you got to start with what do you know? What do you have? What is your inventory? What are your business functions? Are your business functions the same today as they were 2 years ago? Are there new technologies out there that we're bringing in that change our strategy of where we work? And we can talk about some use cases down the road. So think about it again. That's your problem statement. You can't fix what you don't know. And this is where we talk about the 100-day cure is we can put together plans to give you a strategy, roadmap, budget, all those types of things within the first 100 days. But that means, and that's where the work begins. Now, maybe you got some low-hanging fruit you can resolve, but you need to really have that long-term strategy. Now, and I said this before, and I want to say it again because this is important. How do you make it more relevant? Well, think about it. You simplify your application portfolio. You simplify your resiliency and recovery strategies. You simplify your data center strategies. You simplify whether you're going public or private or hybrid or whatever. You start supporting IT sustainability efforts. Reduce your footprint, reduce your power, be able to donate equipment to other things. All these things are really high-level, important things that are happening in our world of IT. And application rationalization ties into each one of these. So I think that's the first thing. It's not as simple as, we're going to go and shut some things down. There's meaning, there's purpose to that. And that's what I think leaders need to understand is this is on the same level of all those other strategic decisions. And are we truly using things, to support our business, to support our team? And the other side of that is not just applications, tools. Everyone's got their favorite tool. I was talking again to our client this week, and they mentioned they have 42 different monitoring tools. Well, come on. I mean, obviously, I'm sure each one has pluses and minuses, but at the same time, I doubt you need 42. So again, who's managing them?
Who's monitoring those 42?
Upgrading them. All these things are costs that need to happen. So these are why this really needs to be top of the level. So what we're going to go into now, I'm going to go through a few more definitions of what we need to do here. Then Ron's going to talk through what the first 100 days will look like, okay, and really what it goes there. So again, if we're going to talk about alignment, purpose, this needs to be not, this isn't an IT driven program. It's an IT, there's a lot of components of IT that will be running it. There are people within IT that will be strategizing and implementing and supporting, but this needs to be an organizational governance team. Business needs to be there. Leadership needs to be there. Your vendors will be there as well as keeping you aware of strategies and their roadmaps and what looks like are better programs or updates or applications that they can bring to the table. All this needs to be there. So it's not just, hey, I'm going to throw this to my applications team and give me a list of things we're going to decom in the next year. That's a failing structure. What the structure is first, make sure leadership's aware and get their commitment. This isn't something that's going to happen in 60 days, 90 days, 100 days. The assessment will, but the final work won't happen in 100 days. The final work might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on your inventory. You'll need to conduct an inventory. We talk about that. And Ron will go into the detail of that. Without that information, you're not going to be able to go into the evaluation and the assessment and the implementation. You're going to have to create roadmaps. You're going to have to create budgets. You're going to have meetings of prioritization. You're going to have ongoing communication with your business partners, with your IT partners, with your vendors, just to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Because guess what? What we defined 6 months ago may not still be valid 6 months from now. Take new technologies that come in. An organization can decide that its strategy is moving to everything to a product like Salesforce. Let's say that. Well, that means that there's probably a good appetite for migrating other existing applications that are running off of other smaller vendors into Salesforce to meet that strategy. And that's not something that happens overnight. There's optimize. It's always going back and looking again, looking forward, looking backwards. And then you go into your execution stage. You have an implementation plan. These all become either individual projects or they become projects run under a governance. And it's kind of we're here to clean up, we're here to focus, and then we're here to support back to the business as usual team to support going forward. And then the final step that a lot of places, I can talk about some of my past lives where just decommissioning was an unknown word. These servers would be sitting there 10 years old, powered on, and nobody knew what they did or what they were doing, but nobody wanted to turn them off because they're afraid they're going to interrupt business somewhere. And in most cases, they probably did. There was probably somebody sitting there that was still using that one application to do something, and if you turned it off, they would scream.
Afraid to unplug something, right?
Thank God for screen tests. It's my favorite thing. I was actually in that other organization. I got the nickname Pull the Plug Patillo was my name. So used to go around and just decommission things left and right. But that's an important part of this because without the decommissioning, then you don't gain the efficiencies of your DR strategy, your data center strategies, your IT sustainability. That's all part of it.
Yeah,
right.
What interesting part there I picked up on is right. You're kind of you're inferring that they should be kind of tied together, right? Like it should be kind of one conversation, or at least trying to facilitate into one conversation. Am I picking up on that correctly?
It needs to be. It needs to have that ongoing conversation at that high level. It needs to be a quarterly meeting with your governance team, and here's our long-term roadmap. Here's our goals for the next year. Here's our goals next year. Oh, is there something new coming in? Is there some business function that is going to be developed that will change what we're doing? Okay, let's stop for a moment, breathe, and figure out where that fits. And I think that's the point. You have governance teams for data. You have governance teams for risk. There needs to be a governance team for this as well.
Okay. All right, Ron. You're coming up with a 100-day game plan, right? You're gonna explain to us how we're going to come up with this. We use this 100 days in order to come up with this, plan so that we can get on the right path.
So I'm like a runner on a block right now, right? So this is where I built my career. This is if you want to talk about anything that makes me enjoy things, these are type of programs and stuff that make me really enjoy what I do, right? So I want to talk a little bit. I want to make the overwhelming simple on this conversation first off, because everything Chris just said, 100% times 10, 20, and 30, right? So it is overwhelming, which is why people put it off. There's a lot of money to be gained. There's an ROI in all this overall. There's an ROI that may not be seen or recognized for a year or two, but the long term, depending on your organization, right? So the reason I want to talk about and make it manageable is because applications solutions are the door into the world. So we touch an application, we need to know about everything. That means procurement, licensing, support, vendors, all that coordination. So when you're talking about rationalization, we're taking application as our main topping point, because as we do our inventory and investigation, you have to touch all those areas. We have to know how it's managed, where the budgets are. So I like to focus on this more because of my passion as an expedition, right? So expeditions need to be funded. Chris mentioned that, but you need to fund the initial state, bring the team together, understand the first 100 days. It says, where's inventory? Where are things done? How is it all gathered? What are the high level processes? How are these meeting our business and core alignment? It's not just a quick fix, but it's that investigation says this will be a long-term journey. It's not something that'll be 2-3 days. Chris mentioned executive support. Securing that buy-in up ahead lets you know that it's going to be successful long-term, because there are going to be those pet groups or those people who bring in 60% of the revenue and say, you can't take my thing away. You can't change this. We do this. You'll need that lean in that kind of comes to help bring that. It's going to get better. It's going to work. You'll see. And then why? ROI. Part of that 100-day journey is understanding, why does this matter? Why should we do this? Streamlining 75 to 90% of the operations, optimizing the technology stack. Chris could talk hours on data center, Google, SaaS, on-prem, hybrid, all those type of things. Optimizing support, license, and maintenance. That's part of that first understanding of where things are, and improving issue resolution and efficiencies, right? So managing all those different areas, understanding that inventory comes from one word, application, right? So part of this journey of looking into it is saying, here's where it is, here's how we go, and how are we going to take the longer roadmap that gets us there. So executive commitment, again, is important to the success of this. But reality, we start coming down to the inventory. The inventory that says, how do we align our core business? What are our core systems? What are our locally managed systems? What I want to take away from this is, we're giving you this big worldview, but this can be done at a department level. This could be done at a service level, right? So I have an organization, you can take any health system, any accounting firm, and they've got a portfolio applications, but you can start with one slice in there. And this is why I get jazzed about it, because it's project related, right? So I say, I've got this over here, this over here, this over here, this over here. We want to go to this one solution, but somebody says, yeah, but we've got to do data migration. We've got to do all those different things. That's the first 100 days. Figuring out what's all involved to do that, bringing all those solutions in and streamlining those workflows, those processes, and defining the work that takes you out. Is it going to be a 3-month project, 6-month project, or so forth, right? You take that, now multiply that by an entire organization's portfolio. I guarantee you're going to find tons of solutions out there that are pet solutions that were done there because they were really good for that business, and they're just maintaining it. And somebody says, it's working, don't bother it. We need to do this acquisition. We need to do this alignment. So doing that in your first 100 days of understanding your application inventory from your corporate business, understanding the locally managed will upset people, but getting that into a spreadsheet, getting that into something that says, here's what it does, here who owns it, here's what it integrates to, here's the standalone, here's the a problem it meets, here's some of the high level costs, and here's all the things about that solution, right? That intelligence is not gathered. I've been to so many organizations in my past. I've been so many organizations to kind of say, well, we just want to pull this into one solution. And then you turn around and there's the primary solution, there's the integrated solution, and then there's solutions that's integrated to the integrated solution. And then there's the integrations that feed up into the warehouse. So Terrence, stop me. I get real passionate about this. Cut me off wherever you need me to be, because it's a big spider web. But that's the first 100 days, right? Define what it is, develop the roadmap that says, how are we going to at least take care of either a service, the overall portfolio, and say, is this going to be a 3-month, 6-month, multi-year, depending on what you're trying to do? What are the workflows? What are all the stakeholders? Now, the big thing in an aspect is, what is the long-term support and maintenance? What governance structure do you have in place? What don't you have in place? Chris mentioned governance structure. That's the longer game, right? 100 days says what you do have, what you don't have, and what you need, and how to get there. That's the roadmap.
And let's even break that down into two smaller chunks. I mean, of that 100 days, there's really 3 things you're doing within that 100 days. And Ron, the discovery is going to take 30 to 45 days. It depends how large your application portfolio is. It depends how complex. It depends how, if you're a health system with 5 hospitals, are you focusing on one hospital? Are you looking across the entire environment? So 45 days is really the data gathering, the meeting with people, the talking to the business. But then you go into your evaluation and rationalization part of the 100 days. And that could be 45 to 90, up to 100, whatever days. That's where you're starting to look at it and go, well, wait a second. This application, and we have actually an example we can discuss about this later. This application has, 7 users. This was brought in. It's costing us $250,000 a year operationally. We can migrate these people over here relatively quickly and save the money and also adhere to our standards. Those are the evaluation rationalizations, low-hanging fruit, and then more important, the long-term roadmap. And then you're going to bring all this to your leadership, and that's where it kind of Ron led to. The last part is getting the leadership buy-in, getting the budget, getting the governance team set up, those types of things. And that's all doable within 100 days. And you can come up with a very solid, strong, implementable strategy in that time period. I don't care how large or small you are.
And the reality is, depending on how deep you want to go into it, if you're just focusing on that application or that work stream or that tool and solution, you stop there. But what you can do is start to say, how do my team structure? How do they manage our overall procurement? How to manage our overall governance, our licenses? Figuring all that out are those. You need to consider this, by the way. It's not just here we pull these applications. You say, by the way, this is what's feeding it. You have 5 stakeholders that are really, really big dogs and have these specialties. Like, you start to define in that roadmap where your barriers to success is, what I like to say, in order to do this, right? And some of that is cultural. The other aspect, the part of this, is differentiating what's IT, what's the strategic approach, organizational alignments, portfolio-specific business goal. But yes, optimization, consolidation, that's a big portion of this overall. But we look at the term application and somebody says, oh, we're all going to do it in one solution. That's workflow. That's paper. That's all those things that go internal and external to this type of thing. So, it's real important that this word rationalization is focused like a laser on what your goal is in those first 100 days of what you want to get out of it long term, because rationalization is a big, big word.
And let me ask you something. Again, this involves a lot of stuff, right? And not to scare anybody off, right? But putting that game plan together, putting that 100-day roadmap is the good first step, because it can kind of show you as to, okay, what's going to be, to your point, what's going to be where do we get the most return on investment from a time, money standpoint? What's going to be the easiest path, right? It's not meant, it's kind of meant, I would think, to unscary the process.
Well, I want to add to that, right? So yes, does it unscary the process? Yes. Does it, the challenge, you use the word the easiest path, everybody chooses the easiest path, right? And that's where we are. The process is not scary. The process is daunting, right? So the scary part is if you keep letting it go from an organizational perspective, Ron Sims, who works there, is going to be out of the job because we can't support this financially to keep growing in this way, right? So that's the part that's scary to me, is that if you don't do this, you really pull away from your core mission. You do pull away from efficiencies. And you do not allow your teams to be nimble and meet the ever-changing business environment, right? So transcriptions, I did this years ago, we went to voice recognition. And they were like, no, it's not going to happen, no. And I worked to get that team to do new things and understand new things, because technology is not going to stop just because we don't address it. But if you keep cobbling them together, you're going to have a cost that makes it scary. And I think that's part of the key. Why do we do this is not so much because we just get jazzed about technology, is because I always look at technology as an extension to the motorcycle rider. If you lean this way, the technology is supposed to go with you. I shouldn't be fighting the bike the entire time, right? And that's the way I look at technology. It should be an extension of the end user, because they can just do this. I've watched my future son-in-law, just type. It's an extension. Like, he does it so fast. That's how technology works. I need voice recognition, by the way. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I
Well,
hear you.
Let's do this. Let's kind of, because people like, I think we've given the at least the lay of the land in terms of how to put together that roadmap. But let's talk about some real life case studies. Let's say some examples of clients that you guys work with to kind of not only put together this 100-day roadmap, but to start trudging through to make progress here. So Chris, maybe you can kind of start talking us through some of what you guys have done.
Certainly. So, and I alluded to one earlier, and I won't go to any particular order. We could probably, Ron's going to have to shut me up because I can talk about this for the next 4 hours. But we were engaged on a project to retire this application. It was bought for a specific, to help create simple business functions. It was allowed to grow inorganically. And before you know it, it went from this departmental use to enterprise use. And they were spending $250,000 a year on it. And they're going, wait a second, who's managing it? Who's owning this? It's not in our strategy. We have other tools that can do this. How do we do this? And it took them quite a long time to work through the inventory, who is on it, who can be on it. And then finally they brought us in towards the end saying, okay, we kind of know the inventory, go in and validate that. We're going to need an archiving strategy for this data, because at some point, even if we migrate it, we're going to have to archive their data for some reason. We have these last handful of users that we need new solutions for. So you need to architect a solution that fits within our strategy, and then you need to migrate them and support them. And it was a 6-month project. It was pretty fast paced for us, but at the end of the day, we moved everything but one group of applications, because they're actually migrating to a new product within the next 90 days. So we just left them on it. No sense changing them to change them again. But we reduced the cost down from $250,000 a year to $24,000 just for the next year, in order for them to just migrate this last set of users. We came up with a full archiving validation ability. Everyone can get their data. We worked with the business users, made sure that they weren't impacted. I mean, that's key. It's very easy. And this is another part of it. IT people are smart. IT people sometimes are rigid, and some are like, well, you're going to get off this application, and you got 30 days to get off this application, and here you go. I'm going to push buttons. Well, you got to remember, at the end of the day, there's a business that's being impacted by this, and you really need to work with them and coordinate with them and make sure that this transition is a good experience and not just a, hey, you pulled my plug, what the hell happened? So that was one of our most recent, what I would call, it's clearly an application rationalization project. It should have been part of a larger program, but it was one of those firefighting things. We want to get off the system. We need to, we need to show operational savings. There's no sense to keep this, et cetera, et cetera.
So I'll throw one out at you as well. Like, this was years ago. We had an application. We were bringing them up, and part of our understanding of what was going on, we got the workflow process, and they needed data from the solution. And the executive team also needed some information which had to do with revenue and so forth. We identified a 19-day manual workflow process. We consolidated it down to 2. These are the type of things that if you just upgrade to upgrade or update to update, you miss. And part of rationalization is taking a larger view of what the solutions you're doing and the processes across the board are occurring for that ROI savings that you cannot necessarily qualify. Ron's spending, and I'm not lying, 19 business days to do, consolidated down to 2, really lets that team grow and do other things through automation. That type of rationalization. Chris, you and I, we met in different planes with regards to bringing disparate systems into the centralized system, right? And everybody's got these, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. But then it became under one support and maintenance, one support and licenses. Maybe it's not thousands and thousands, or maybe it is thousands of dollars, but it's also the number of people that support it cannot necessarily, quote unquote, go away. They can do smarter and better things and align and be more effective, which then ultimately your end users don't end up having as much challenges across the board. This is a conversation you could use every single time, no matter what project transformation or whatever you want to term it, small to large.
Yep. That's agreed. And then, we can look at this other example about either from the payer or the provider side. Let's talk about documents. Let's talk about imaging. I mean, we've done multiple projects where we've changed out an enterprise imaging system, had to migrate huge amount of data sets, imaging data sets, CTs, MRs, X-rays, et cetera. Had to come up with workflows, training, viewing solutions, that type of stuff, and take 4 or 5 disparate systems and migrate them into one. That's on the provider side, obviously. In this sense, this works into your referring physicians. How are they going to get their images? I mean, this is not a small feat, but at the end of the day, it goes back to Ron's point: one system, one solution, one technology, the ability to optimize on those features as opposed to worry about how am I going to integrate these 5 solutions to work our daily workflow.
I'm also going to soft toss Terrence, and again, you can tell I'm really jazzed about this topic, right? I'm going to soft toss Chris here, and then Chris, do not go down on a tangent. Part of our IT structure and part of what we do is we like to get what we think is ROI out of our systems, and how many systems aren't vanilla anymore? How many systems don't do what they're originally designed to do? How many are back on version control, like they're still using 2008 SQL Server? In addition, is there opportunity to do the data center so it's consolidation? More importantly, as we've seen in the last 6 months to 1 year, security, managing those breaches, managing those downtimes, managing those workflows. How many of those have been cobbled and maintained and kind of a little butchered to get us to what we need today? And then it's an, oh crap, let's fix that kind of thing. Part of the rationalization says, where are you in today's standards? Where are your solutions? Where are their versions? And where do you want to be in 1, 2, 3, 5 years? Now let's create that roadmap across. But that's a lot of investigation. And before I finish the soft toss to Chris, I think that the thing is part of what we do as organizations, and this is nothing against our teams, but we ask Ron Sims, who's been there for 5 to 10 years, to give me an inventory, understand where we are. So he gives me that Excel, but that's as deep a dive as it goes, right? So some of that getting, even in your organization, get somebody that's in the auditing, get somebody external, whatever it is, to kind of look into that world and say, help me give me a fresh set of looks, because these guys are wicked smart and they're going to do whatever they can to keep things working as the best they can. But is that the best way? So, Chris.
No, and you actually mentioned something interesting, because in other work that we've done and other work that simplifies this 100 days possibly is there are organizations that have taken an attempt to do this. There are organizations that have tools that maintain their application architecture, application documentation, application status. Is it a product that we're interested in investing in? Is it a product that we're going to plan to decommission in 6 months, whatever? Well, that could be part of the 100-day assessment. If those tools exist, well, maybe they just need a validation. Maybe you need a new set of eyes, just like you said, Ron, to go in, have some conversations with your architects, have some conversations with your applications team, have some conversations with your business, your infrastructure, and say, okay, you know what? We can take what you've already done and we can validate the list and then use that to bring it forward. So maybe it's not a start from point A. Maybe it start from point G, but review everything and get you there quicker. So maybe that 100 days turns into 60 days or whichever. But that's a lot of work that an extra set of eyes can do, because the people that are too close to it will look at it and go, no, this is correct, but not necessarily dive deep enough to make that assessment.
And I'm going to circle back around here, right? This is why we need executive support, because then all of a sudden you start looking into, Terrence, if I walk through your house today and I start going here, there, and your wife looks at you and says, get him out of here, you need to say, no, I need to keep him in here because I need his thoughts on how we should do our room. That's the same concept. So I think
I'd take your office mate. I think if he showed up, I think we'd be fine.
But you need that executive support, because once you start looking into things, people start hyperventilating, because it doesn't mean they didn't do something well. It's just understanding where you are and where you're going, and then having that team do that driving. Even if it's from a program oversight, you don't necessarily have to have someone else do it, your vendors. If you have someone overseeing governance, projects, or whatever that portfolio is, it helps keep them on task that says, here's what you're marching to and why, which goes back to the why the mission matters, the ROI, streamlining operation, optimizing technology stacks, optimizing support and licenses, workflows. How many calls have we ever been on, Chris, that where we're talking to somebody and said, yeah, we integrate, we have the data, and we just send it up there, and then it freezes, right? Like no one says, well, what are we getting back for that process? Oh yeah, we don't need to do that anymore because that CMS issue has gone away, or that regulatory issue has gone away, kind of thing. Those are type of things that you really get to look at and get rid of redundancy and outdated items, including technology stack.
Exactly.
I'll try to stay calm, Terrence. I will. I really am.
No, please. This is the most emote I've seen you in a while, so this is good.
Good. By the way, now I can see why your office mate and you are a good balance. You're very excitable, and
Guinness.
He's doing great. Like he's doing kind of what I want to do this weekend, to be honest.
There you go.
So do you guys think we covered kind of the governance side of things and
No.
how to be? No. Okay. Let's dive into that part then a little more. So I'm going to kind of
two quick touches to that, right?
Sure.
There's program, there's application rationalization, governance, as in how are we getting there? How are we managing that journey? How's it going to look? What do we need to invest in? Blah, 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 blah. Program, right? The governance part that we didn't touch about, what Chris also mentioned, is the ongoing, right? The governance part comes into play, which is the hardest thing. You fix everything, it looks good. If you don't maintain it, it's broken from day two, right? So the governance piece comes in that says, is this our core mission? Does this solution align? Does this pilot really need to be done? Or you start looking at your data and it says, did you know we're making $3 million off of this thing over here? Like, do we bring that into a fold? Do we expand that? That governance piece that comes in and says, why are we adding this? Why are we changing this type of thing? That's much more executive support and capital funding, long perspective. Once the organization gets, look at it this way. Organizations grow through acquisition or organically, right? So organically, okay, we're just taking on, we're just going to do whatever. Acquisition, I just bought this firm or bought this accounting, bought this technology, SaaS group, and they really do this great. Yeah, but how are we going to integrate them? Are we going to make them unprofitable? Or are we going to be able to align them in? How do we have that careful balance? That's the ongoing governance, the structure that comes out of that you have to commit to and have that from bottom up so they can ultimately make that decision.
Yeah, and I want to ask him, Chris, before I toss it to you here with that, right? And you guys have mentioned this a number of times as I picked up on this, right? Is that partnership between both IT and the business side of things. And it's really right. It's not isolated. It's not like this is an IT thing. It really is all, it's got to be both
cross-functional,
right?
It's as cross-functional as it can be. I mean, and I'll tie that into that, and then I'll go back to my initial thought. One of the things, again, I love IT people. I am an IT person, but I think we focus within the business and IT, equally. But you've got to go in this with this mantra of do no harm, and also minimize any impact. So if you look at it just from we're going to get rid of this, we're going to work quickly, we're going to decommission, blah blah blah, that will be painful too. Which is why that cross-functional team is important. You need to understand what is the real impact. How do we do this work? So even as we're making the transition or the implementation or the upgrade or the migration, how are we not going to impact our day-to-day business? So that's where that cross-functional team comes in. One of the things we did in that small little project, we became very close with some of the business owners because they, and even at the end, they were just looking, oh, you changed this. I don't understand how to do this. We get on a phone call and show them how to do that. Those types of things are going to be key to this because, as we all alluded to, nobody likes change. Nobody wants to come in one day and all of a sudden go to click the same application that they've used for the last 10 years and realize it's not there anymore. So that's where that cross-functional team is really, really important. And this includes your vendor management team because they're going to have to unravel some contracts. This includes your business teams. This includes your finance and legal. And this includes, obviously, your technical teams as well.
And I'm gonna use a term, Terrence, co-leadership, right? So in this aspect of business and IT, it used to be business saying, we're doing this. How do we do it from a technology perspective? And IT would run out and say, here's the tools or here's things. Okay, we've got this. And right now, what you're seeing the shift in the digital age is co-leadership, right? So I come to the table. Chris says, we need to do this. I need a CRM solution tomorrow. Okay, but what problem are we solving with that CRM solution? Why isn't this good today? Do we need to have the Maserati, or can we get away with a nice Ford truck, which I happen to like those type of things? And that's that co-leadership. In the past, it was IT, yes, enables, but also limits, right? And the reality right now is it's becoming partnership, co-leadership. Those terms are very generic, but it really, in our world today, it is what it is. And if a business leader doesn't agree, again, look at the last 6 months to a year, how much were they screaming when they couldn't get into their solutions to do their business, right? So.
And needs to be that way moving forward, right? Because let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago, that wasn't the case, right? Technology was just a small part of the impact in business. And so business leaders could drive down, I would think.
And it was also very departmentalized. And it was, so people that making decisions 10, 15, 20 years ago were the departments, and they might prefer that this little purple button was over in the top right corner as opposed to the red button over here. And that's how they made their technology decisions. Now, luckily, at least a lot of that's rolled up to a corporate structure. So those types of decisions are made. But to your point, the technology, the integration, the overall large scope of the enterprise now makes a lot of those decisions. I was talking with the CMIO yesterday from a very large health system. I won't say their name, but we were just going back and forth. They've got 5 or 6 health systems merged together. He mentioned that they were the largest, both the largest Epic and Cerner customer in the nation, which is obviously 2 EMRs and obviously competing with each other. Even with one of them, they had, even though it was the same vendor, they had 5 different instances of it. Talk about application rationalization, talk about cost savings, talk about simplification. I mean, yes, that's a multi-year, never-ending program. But to that point, if you don't start, you never get there. If you don't get the wins, you don't get the momentum. If you don't get the momentum, you don't see the ROI.
2 things, Terrence. You said 15 years. I don't even think it's that far back. I think with what has changed with a big company that does online purchasing, big company social media, I think the world is getting much smaller. And the world is realizing now that they have to, from a social aspect, business ethics, or technology and capability, understand that IT is a large player in the game currently. I would also like to suggest, while we talk a lot around payers, providers, healthcare, data centers, and stuff like that, what we're talking about rationalization is agnostic. It does not matter, right? Any industry can do this. You can go and say, I need Ron Sims' team to walk into, I don't care what application or technology area is, come in, first 100 days, give me an audit, help me under your business solutions, help me understand what's strategically there, help me understand where are all my procurement, my support licenses, give me that humongous inventory. And those teams will tell you what is their specialty, why they do their job so well as an organization. And you say, oh, these align, that aligns, that aligns, this doesn't, this doesn't, this doesn't. Oh, you got 17 of these. Like from an organization application perspective, you go from a humongous piece or a slice, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. So the key takeaway for this today, one of the things I want to make sure everybody understands is we're thinking global, we're thinking big, but it really starts where you want to focus. But you need to know what you have. So if you're a department X and you think, let me get somebody to look and see what I have as an IT perspective, is this best in breed? Maybe you don't need best in breed. Are we keeping up with the market kind of thing, right? Like, what is it there? And you do that assessment, you do that workflow, you do that inventory review, and you say, how do we align that to the overall, and then how do we get ahead? Or globally, my entire portfolio. It's truly up to you on how much. But people need to not be paralyzed because of the amount of work is involved, because I get yelled at from people, it's just work. Well, it is. It's just how many resources can you dedicate to that work, and chaos can be managed. How much of this do we want to bite off now? How much do we want to invest in the next 6 months, year? What's the 5-year plan? And we know from an IT perspective, 5 years is an eternity, right? But we can say next 2 to 3 years, here's what you can do. Right. So I apologize if I say
no, and revisit, because you said 5 years is an eternity. Things may change on year 3. Doesn't negate what you've done in years 1 and 2. It just means you may have to adjust what you do going forward.
Yep. And who knows? Maybe our data centers will all be in this little thing. We'll be walking around with our data centers going forward.
There you go.
Quantum computing, right? So let's as we're getting ready to kind of wrap things up here in the last 5 or 10 minutes, let's talk about some let's leave the folks with some words of encouragement and things that they can do to kind of move the needle forward, right? Because we've talked about this as being could be a big hairy monster, right? But let's talk about how we can kind of take bite-sized chunks out of it, and whether it's how do they start their journey in terms of addressing application rationalization. What are some of the resources that Rhyno and they should be looking for in terms of steps forward?
Well, I mean, luckily, this isn't for the squeamish. We've said this several times. So you need obviously people who are, as Ron says, jazzed about this. You want to get in there and you want to be excited about what you're doing, as excited as you are if you're putting a new application in or you're going through new technology or something like that. But again, the first 100 days is the crawl, walk, run mentality. You can't put a strategy together without the data. You have to take some time. It does not take a lot of resources to do that. It just takes some fortitude. It's not even a very, if you can do it internal, great. If you need to go external, it's not even a very expensive engagement for those 100 days. It's about having people have the focus and the time to not worry about, and I hate to say this because I supported production the majority of my career. I'm not going to worry about the production issue today. I'm not going to worry about that new implementation. I'm just going to focus on what our inventory is, talk to the business, find out what they use. And if you see, there's micro and macro steps. Initially, you'll start with macro usage, and then you'll drill down to micro usage. So the first 45 days is documenting high level. The next 45 days is micro level, and the budgets and the use and the costs and the vendor roadmap. But again, it's not, that part is not, I think Ron says it's work. It's just work. So get it started. Get somebody to approve that with the goal that, trust us, in 100 days, we're going to come with a plan that you can either decide at that point illogically to stop, and we've invested, at least we have a point in time, good inventory of what we're doing. To Ron's point, that good inventory lasts for about a month or two and then starts changing. Or we can then plan on how we're going to go forward. But don't look at the plan going forward yet. Look at the first 100 days.
So one of the things, Terrence, that I like to do is I always like me, my teams or groups, whatever, to say, is my ROI good, right? So what I would suggest, if you're a department, you're a regional, you're a CIO, you're a CEO, is say, what KPIs am I being measured by? What do I want to list as my core area, right? What applications, off the top of my head, piece of paper, what applications do I know that I use every day, and how is that supporting that? And then say, from my aspect, if I'm a department, I'm using these things, is the amount of money I'm spending on my solutions, my process, my workflow, is that give me an ROI, or am I barely at that line? Am I breaking even, or are we just doing that great kind of thing? Then I would ask you, if you're barely breaking even, let's figure it out. You're doing that great. How much greater could you be? But it really starts with you taking an internal assessment. Just like everything in our personal lives, we need to know what's with us first. Look at your groups and then figure out, as Chris said, can you do it internally? Can you say, hey guys, how fast can we get to the modern standard? Or is this a thorough enough inventory for me to kind of say where we are? My suggestion would be, is if I've taken an hour or 2 or 3 on while I'm eating my lunch and I'm listening these things out, and I say, oh, this is pretty good. My question would be, did I actually just scratch the surface, or is there a whole bunch underneath, right? So this is the reason why I get jazzed about these topics, is because every time there's a problem, there's a solution, but there may be 5 other problems that are fixing that symptom. So you may be looking at your symptom, start with your KPI, start with what you're being, your ROI, what you're being judged on, and then define everything that's there. Is it feeding into that? And if it's not, then let's take a look and see what that is.
Now, and I know we've talked from one side of the coin for most of this. I also want to be very cautious, or at least have people cautious that make sure you contain your scope a little bit. This application rationalization is not an upgrade strategy, so or it's not a new implementation, new project. It's not just that. I mean, it can become that if your governance determines that you're going to take your time and do this that way, fine. But don't let a rationalization of application make you all of a sudden responsible for 4 new pieces of functionality that the business wants. Incorporate that as well while you're doing it, because that's when you start bumping into things and you start not getting your ROIs. You start not starting to solving it. So I would just say, as with everything else, understand your scope, stay within your walls. You might be asked at times to do more, and that's fine. It's real and good, but don't try to solve all the problems of the world with application rationalization. Remember, your goal is simplification at the end of the day. If there's other things that bump into it, then let's sit and talk and figure out how we do it together.
And I'm going to put this out there for you. One more thing, Terrence. If I'm a CIO or I'm coming in new to an organization, I'm a CEO, I'm whatever, C level, D level, is you get first, 60, 100 days, whatever, 90 days to kind of assess where you are, develop your plan, and figure out what you're doing and what needs to be adjusted, right? So I usually, whenever I would take over groups or different things, is just listen for this first 60, 30 days. And usually it's listening to pain points, blah, 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 blah. But the other portion I would say is you also need to be doing that co-leadership part that says technology, where is it enabling me? Where is it blocking me? How's it supporting my team? Because that's also an investment, right? You don't just come in and say, how can we do things better? You come in and say, how can we do things more effectively and efficiently? Technology is always going to be there. It's always going to be that partner in the room, whether you want to acknowledge it or not.
Can I ask you guys, like in terms of, as we wrap up here, like what is a good way for, folks to try and attack that, 100-day, plan to, I mean, let's face it, to involve a Rhyno in that, and maybe what that would, kind of look like.
It's a pretty simple engagement document. I mean, let's talk business for a second.
Yeah.
We're not going to come with a large team of 40 people to sit and come up with a person or two. A lot of it can be done remotely. It doesn't even have to be on site. There might be some on-site meetings and things like that. But it's really a matter of having that focus. And I've got to say it. Everybody's busy. Everybody gets pulled into things. And to have sometimes an outside resource. I was talking to another CISO yesterday. It was like, yeah, sometimes the best thing about being a consultant is that you don't have to go to that minutia meetings and stuff. You can focus on the work, which is great. Same thing here. What happens internally at sometimes is you ask for 100 days and it takes 300 days because you were pulled into 7 other things. Allow us to be that focus. We will come in, we will meet with you, we will determine. But it's not invasive. It doesn't. You're not going to have a swarm of people coming in. It's just a matter of taking that first step and saying that let's do this. 100 days goes in a blink. Let's see where we come out in 100 days and make sure that we've got something that makes sense. And I guarantee you, whether we scratch the surface or go deep, you're going to find some wins within that 100 days. Whether you make this a 1-year strategy or a 5-year strategy, you're going to find some wins. Hopefully, it's an ongoing strategy that continues to become better. But ultimately, even if you said that we're going to do this for a year and see what you can find for us, there's going to be wins, there's going to be cost savings, there's going to be ROI.
And I'm going to add a little flavor to that, right? So, and then we, yes, Rhyno can align and help you, and actually probably make you very successful over time. But I would also look to align it from a program and a worldview, right? So Chris mentioned you can do some of this internally, but maybe there's that independent. Either way, you need that type of person that is not so plugged in, so culturalized, that says, well, I know this, I know that. You need that person that can facilitate, have conversations, make you not feel threatened, kind of thing, and do that internal assessment. You also need that analytics that kind of can pull all that data together and figure it all out. So whether it's Chris's Rhyno's team or it's internally to your overall team, however that comprised, you need to have those 2-3 people that can pull all that together and do it quickly, fastly. Otherwise, it won't get done, right? So looking at that dynamic, and I'm very much into my team's focus on, aligning, diffusing, aligning, and moving together. Kind of that's my motto. And doing these type of inventory steps really needs to kind of say, look, we're just looking. And then aligning the information to make things work and help, and then moving together, saying, how can we ultimately move together either from your team, internal, external, and overall organizationally. So I put a lot in that external to the teams kind of worldview into these type of things.
Well, guys, every time we do these events, I always say I use that expert term, but in this case, it is whether it's disaster recovery, resiliency, whether it's data strategies, and in this case, application rationalization. You guys prove it. You guys hit the mark every time, and I appreciate your time today. For those to reach out directly, Chris Patio both and Ron Sims, you guys are both on LinkedIn, rhynohealthcare.com, and we'll be doing these subsequent ones again because, both of you guys have said, this is not something that's tackled in 1 hour, right? We could probably do 4 hours of this and go on, but we'd probably end up like your office mate over there at one point, and probably asleep in the corner if we did that for 4 hours, guys. So, but I appreciate your time. Any closing thoughts before we check out here for the day?
No, we always appreciate the opportunity to do something like this. Obviously, it's a one-sided conversation. I hope the audience appreciated or understood and got something out of it. We would love to continue those conversations if necessary, but obviously this is a journey that everyone needs to go on at some point. Small or large organizations. Hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and we appreciate your time.
Well, we appreciate
I appreciate you inviting me to these things. I appreciate having the conversation and dialogue. I want to say that these are one of these topics that it's going to get addressed by hook or by crook. And my goal in life with regards to some of these things is to be proactive and not on reactive to all this type of thing. So.
Yeah, and you guys, I appreciate the fact that you're putting us out there, right? This is to all to help the same community that we're working within, right? In healthcare and IT and the businesses, and help run more effectively and more efficiently, and to kind of see around the corner for them. So you guys are doing the industry itself a service by doing these and putting this content out. So kudos to you guys. So. With that said, you guys have a great weekend. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next one, because there will be a next one.
All right. I'll see if I can get Guinness a Red Bull or something, kind of thing.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye, all.
Bye, guys.